Hi and welcome. In today's video we're going to be taking a look at setting the valve clearances on the Virago XV535. This is a task that can be carried out with just a handful of simple tools, no specialist equipment required. Now while it's not necessary to actually carry out this adjustment with the carbs removed, it is far easier to do it with the carbs removed. So while the carburetors are off, as you can see here, with the inlets plugged up to prevent debris entering, we have access to the inlet rocker panels, which are held in with 2 bolts. So when you remove these, be careful because there's a gasket underneath. Try not to damage that gasket. You've got one obviously on this side, one on that side, and then the exhaust ones are on the opposite sides of the cylinder, which are nice and easy to access. The tricky ones to access being the 2 inlet ones, and the exhaust one on the rear cylinder, a little tricky. The front one easiest of all. And what I'm probably going to do is, as we've got good visibility here presently, is show you the process on this particular inlet valve. First thing we need to do, 2 10mm bolts. And of course take off the top rocker colour panels. That's 2 10mm bolts removed. You have to give this a bit of a wiggle and lift it away. Inside there is a rubber gasket, so check that for damage and make sure that's okay. And this is why you have to wiggle this off carefully. You don't want to tear that and damage it, although if you did get a leak here it would be relatively minor. And here you can see the adjustment, which is a simple screw and lock nut setup, but utilising an Allen head, a sunken Allen head up here, and a 10mm bolt down here. Next thing we need to do is get this this piston on number 1 cylinder to top dead centre. So there's the valve that we're going to be adjusting, front cylinder inlet valve. We need to get this to top dead centre so that we know it's on its compression stroke, so that we know that both inlet and exhaust valves are both fully open, and then we can adjust both the inlet and the exhaust valves. Then we'll do the same to the rear cylinder. To find top dead centre, the first thing you need to do is remove the spark plugs, as you can see I've already done here and just left that loose in there. It actually is beneficial if you can hold something on top of the spark plug hole as you're turning the crankshaft to top dead centre, so you can feel compression. And to find top dead centre, the next thing we need to do is remove these 2 bolts from the crankcase. Let me just focus on that for you. We need to remove these 2 bolts down here on this crankcase. So for that you'll need a coin or a very large screwdriver, flat bladed screwdriver. Here we are looking at those. Neither of these should be particularly tight, so a large flat bladed screwdriver should do a relatively easy job. I've just slackened them off, and then they can be undone by hand. You see in this case the O-ring seal got left stuck on there, so do check for that and make sure you don't lose it. And I'm just going to pop that back on here, and that slots into the little recess down there. Little fiddly to do with one hand, so I'll seat that properly when I'm not holding the camera in the other. And then same with the large one, which has an O-ring seal as well. I'm going to pop those down there so that all the necessary bits and pieces. And inside here, I don't know how well you're going to be able to see this, but hopefully it actually doesn't look too bad. You can see there's a big bolt head, and up there is the flywheel. What we need now is a socket to turn this bolt head, and we're going to look for marks on this flywheel. Something else that you can do with, and this applies to all motorbikes, and it's very, very easy if you have a motorbike with a main stand, a centre stand, or failing that, provided you've got some way of raising the rear wheel off the ground. And what you do is you put the motorbike into its highest gear, so 5th, 6th or whatever it happens to be, and then have somebody turn the back wheel in the direction of travel, and this will actually rotate the flywheel here, and you'll be able to see the timing marks come round. Now, when you don't have the ability to do that, the other method, of course, is to turn the crankshaft bolt. Now, in some cases, you need a special key to do that on some motorbikes, which can be a royal pain in the backside. So if that's the case, I think if you watch my Ducati timing belt videos, you'll actually notice that's how I aligned the timing marks on the Ducati, is by turning the rear wheel rather than having to either make or buy the special tool to turn the crankshaft bolt. So enough waffling about that. Let's get this set up, and we'll get this turned to the timing mark so we can get on with adjusting the valve clearances. Oh, something I forgot to mention at the start of the video: when you're doing the valve clearances, the engine must be stone cold. So it needs to have been left overnight, and the engine needs to be absolutely stone cold to make sure that the valve clearances are correct. We've got a 14mm socket on the crankshaft bolt. As I say, you can do this by putting it in top gear and have somebody rotate the rear wheel, if you don't have a 14mm socket, for example. And you've got one thick line there which matches up with this little line right up here, which is probably difficult to see, but it's there up at the top of this this bolt hole. And to get this to top dead center, there are, when your valves are visible like this, there are three ways, well, two definite ways of knowing, and three ways of knowing that you're getting in that general area. So what you do is you turn your crankshaft bolt clockwise. Apologies for the jittery camera, I'm trying to do this while holding the camera. So you turn this clockwise, and in that little window you will see marks pass by. Now, the reason you need to take the spark plugs out is, of course, because you'll feel the compression coming up. So there we go, we've got that one there. Let me focus on that for you. The T shows top dead center for the rear cylinder up here. So that shows that you're on top dead center for the rear cylinder. However, that top dead center could be top dead center on your exhaust stroke or your compression stroke. This is why you need to know which one you're on, because you've got, this is what a 4-stroke engine does. You've got 2 upwards and 2 downward strokes. So you need to know that you're on your compression stroke, which is when both valves are closed, which is when the tension is off both springs. So as you're turning it round, you can, if possible, put a thumb or some such over the spark plug hole, or top tip, as my man Ed China would say, get something with a rubber bung type end like this valve lapping tool here, and hold that, or get someone to hold that over the spark plug hole as you turn it, and you will feel the compression as it comes up. When it's on its exhaust stroke, of course, you'll hear the air escaping out of the exhaust, and it won't be coming out of the spark plug hole because you've got it blocked with this. When you're on your compression stroke, it will physically try to force this off. So that's one way of doing it. The other way is, as you're turning, is watch your valves. So as we turn this round, what you can see just now is you've got your exhaust valve opening and now closing again, which means the next stroke will be the inlet valve. As your piston starts to move back down, your inlet valve will open, drawing in your fuel and air mixture. And as that reaches the bottom, this will close. So the next stroke, upward stroke, is your compression stroke, at which point both of these will be closed. So what you do at this point is, let me focus up in here for you, turn this, keeping an eye on there for that thick single black line, which should appear very shortly. There we go. And that indicates you're on top dead center. What you need to do now is get a hold of both the inlet and the exhaust valves and see if you can wiggle them, see if there's a little bit of wiggle room. If there is, then you know that you're on top dead center and the pressure is relieved from the valve springs. So the next thing we need to do is go ahead and adjust the inlet and exhaust valve clearances. Having referred to the owner's manual, we now have number one cylinder, the front cylinder, on top dead center on its compression stroke, as identified by the timing mark in the window, by the fact that you felt compression in the cylinder as explained, and also by the fact that both valves have a bit of wiggle room, which is the non-technical way of checking to see if there's any pressure on the valves and it's not on its compression stroke. Inlet valve clearances, we've checked the manual, it's between 0.07mm and 0.12mm, so we're going to set that using the 0.10mm gauge that we have. Exhaust valve clearances are slightly higher because they do run hotter, so they need a bit more clearance, and they are 0.12 to 0.17. So I'm going to set that with the 0.15 feeler gauge here. The markings are a little bit worn, so you can't really see them that well, but I've used this set for so long that I kind of know which is which. But what I'm going to do is set that a little bit on the slightly looser side than rather than going for a firm sliding fit, so that I know that's got a little bit more wiggle room, and it's closer towards the 0.17 side of things. So the first one we're going to use, of course, is the 0.10. What we do first of all, now the engine is stone cold, everything's set, and to be honest, that's actually pretty good already. A little bit on the loose side, but let's try 0.15 just out of curiosity. And that won't quite go. So I'd say that one is actually pretty much bang on. That's not at all bad. So ordinarily I would call that good enough and leave it. However, for the purposes of this demonstration, I want to actually run through the procedure for adjusting this. So first of all, we have a 10mm spanner and a 3mm Allen wrench, box wrench as our colonial cousins would call it, I believe. So popping that in there. This is the same method as the flat blade screwdriver and locknut method. The only difference being it's you're using an Allen key instead of a screwdriver. So you would, using your ring spanner, maybe that's what they call the box wrench in America, I'm not sure. So one of my American viewers can clarify that for me, please, if you'd be so kind. But the manual mentions box wrench, so that's either the ring spanner or the Allen key. But anyway, you slacken off the lock nut with the ring spanner, which is possibly the box wrench, and then using the Allen key, you adjust that until you've got a firm sliding grip with your feeler gauge like so, and then nip that up and just double check that, and you can see hopefully there that slides in and out, but with some drag, with a little bit of drag. You basically, it's tricky to describe this on video, but essentially if you grip hold of your feeler gauge, grip it really tightly and do that, and you can see it won't move anywhere. Grip it really loosely, you can see it slops about, but if you just kind of hold it so you can feel the blade dragging through your fingers, that is the kind of feel that you're going for. And this is the same whether you're setting a spark plug gap or whether you're setting a valve clearance gap. And that there, as you can see, is pretty good. So I'm just going to nip that up and double check it, because these have a habit, can have a habit of going out when you tighten up the lock nut. So it depends how tight the actual adjuster screw is. But that, as you can see, is pretty good. So that's the 0.10mm, and that's your inlet valve adjusted. What we do now is move on to the exhaust valve and do the exact same thing. And then the next step in the process, but obviously with the exhaust valve, you're using the 0.15mm feeler gauge, and setting it slightly, very slightly looser. So you're still feeling a little bit of drag there, but very slightly looser. Not so loose that a 0.20 will slide in, but not so tight that you've got a lot of drag on there. Next thing we need to do is move on to cylinder 2, and the process for adjusting is precisely the same. When all of them are done, rotate the engine, the crankshaft, twice over fully, so that both sets of pistons rotate fully twice, and recheck the clearances on all cylinders. Once you're happy that they're okay, covers back on, a little bit smear of oil around the rubber O gaskets just to make sure they seat properly, and nip up the two 10mm bolts. So that pretty much sums it up. Nothing like as tricky as you might have first thought. Access is surprisingly good, especially if you happen to have the carburetors removed for whatever reason. So that's the only real sort of very useful tip. As I say, the only tricky one is the rear cylinder exhaust, because it's just so awkward to reach into. Of course, you need the seat and the battery tray and everything out of the way so that you can get in there from the back where my hand is there. Other than that, it's actually quite straightforward, and the only advice that I could really offer is if you have to take the carburetors off for some reason, that's a perfect and ideal time to do the valve clearances while they're off. It's just not worth sort of going, I'll give that a miss until it's due in 500 miles or whatever. You might as well just get in there and do it, because with the carburetors out of the way, you've got much more easy access. So that's setting the valve clearances. Valve clearances on the other XV series is very similar. The only real difference is where the timing marks appear and how to access them, but the procedure is exactly the same. So just refer to your manual or online for the valve clearance settings. Make sure your engine is cold, so that means left overnight, and just get in there and give it a go. And once you've finished, make sure couple of full rotations, recheck the clearances before you button everything back up. Once you're happy, fasten everything back up, make sure it's all tightened up and everything's cleared out of the way before you fire the bike up, and enjoy your new sweet running engine. Hope you enjoyed this. Thank you for watching.